Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Saturday afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. For those of you who are here for the first time, my show is about celebrating artists and their body of worth. What makes a great artist? How do they get from point A to point B and beyond? Well, I'm very excited about the artist that we're going to be celebrating today. It's Robert Pagent, who was an Agnes de Mille, Jerome Robbins dancer. He also was with the Ballet Monte Carlo, Russe in Monte Carlo. And I am very, very excited that we have his partner of 47 years, William Schneider, who's going to be here today to help piece together this remarkable life. And also, we're going to hear many conversations from interviews that were conducted over the years. So before I start, before I bring William Schneider on, I'd like to begin with a clip from probably one of his most iconic roles, and that was from Carousel with the great and wonderful Bambi Lynn. Enjoy this clip. Bill Schneider, welcome to our show today. I do want to say before we begin that, of course, was Robert Pagent and Bambi Lynn, who turns 95 on Monday. She is the last surviving member of the original company of Carousel. She was 17 in this shot here. And you'll tell us a little bit about the history behind the footage that we just saw. But welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm feeling great now that it's here. I wanted to say that this dance always breaks me up, so I grabbed a tissue in case. But what happened was that Agnes de Mille was hired to do Carousel, and she wanted two of the dances photographed. So against all rules, she arranged for the dancers to perform it after a regular performance. Now you'll notice that the accompanist is a piano. It's not an orchestra because the orchestra would never have agreed to it. So anyway, what happened was that after it was filmed, one of the dancers decided they did not want to sign any papers or release. So the film disappeared for almost 50 years. And then Lawrence Langner, the producer of Carousel, died and left all of his material to the Paley Center, otherwise known as the Museum of Television. So all of a sudden we get a call. Jane Crane, the research director, guess what just came in? And she said, it came in marked Oklahoma. But as soon as I saw it, I knew it was a Carousel. So you got to come over and see it. And that's how the film was rediscovered.
After 50 years. And I think I misspoke. Bambi was 19, not 17 in this footage. So, but I want to ask you, Bill, you and Robert were together for 47 years. So God bless you both. But how did the two of you meet?
How did we meet? Well, I'll try to keep it short, but anyway.
This is your time.
Anyway, what happened was that I was standing in line to a men's room in a bar I used to go to, and I got talking to the guy in front of me, and he was a set designer for ABC. And we got talking, and he had a friend who also went to Carnegie Tech. They had just come out of there, Ken Welsh. Well, Ken Welsh was a composer, and he worked with people who wanted to be in the theater, and he wrote special material for them and arrangers. And he used to like to have friends come and kind of see an audition. And I became one of his friends, and I saw in his living room Carol Burnett, Barbara Streisand, Shirley Jones, and Carol. He wrote a song for her, and I was one of the first persons to hear "I Made a Fool of Myself" over John Foster Dulles, which catapulted. Right away, she was booked into the Blue Angel, which was
that was the song that originally put her on the map.
That started her whole career, and of course she stayed for so long. That hired him as she started to become more famous and do shows. She always had Ken alongside her, and she arranged, but. Of course, that was 1957.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2014, she came to New York to do show, Muglaters. And I sent a little note back to her, and at the doorman, I never expected to hear from her. And 2 days later, she sent me this beautiful letter. And it says, "Dear Bill, thank you for your kind words. I'm in touch with Kenny, and of course, Mitzi's death can have a huge gap in his world and everyone's world who knew and loved her. But I like this part. Wow, you were there all those years ago? What beautiful memories we all have. I send you love, Carol."
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Getting back to where I met him. So then I met the head set designer of ABC, and he had an 80-acre estate down in New Hope, and he needed a caretaker. Now, it was farmed out. The farm was all rented, and he had a beautiful house, and he needed a caretaker, and I was going to be the great writer. So I needed a quiet place. But Bob Pagent was a friend of Jimmy's, the guy I'm talking about. And Bob was a frequent guest and sometimes worked at the New Hope Playhouse. And we became friends. And then he needed a roommate because his roommate had left to another place. And then I was kind of tired of New Hope. So I moved in with Bob. And that's how it kind of started.
And that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship and a great relationship. Now, when you said that you met him, you were standing in line when you first met him. Did you?
No, I met him after I met the set designer. Go ahead. Yeah, so that's how I met Bob, and we hit it off, and I moved into his apartment on 57th Street, quite a swanky area then and now, and our rent was $36 a month.
Wow.
I wish I had stayed there, still would be rent control.
Now, I've always, within my shows, I'm always about celebrating artists and their bodies of worth. Were you very familiar when you first met Robert about his legacy, the work that was behind him, including Carousel and Oklahoma and Rodeo, his involvement, of course, with Agnes de Mille, Jerome Robbins? You were very familiar with all of that work that he had done when you first met?
Well, I gradually got to know them, and of course, I knew whenever Bob was working on shows. He did a show after Oklahoma called One Touch of Venus, and that show ran quite a while. By the way, the Carousel ran for 80 performances, and before that, when he went into Oklahoma, the lead dancer made it through the opening night, but he had injured himself. And so Bob went in the next night and played it for 7 weeks. But anyway, One Touch of Venus was interesting. It became a movie with Ava Gardner. And
Robert Young.
You remember that movie?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. But I guess in the 60s, a university and a group called Saving Dance Material decided that they wanted to reconstruct One Touch of Venus dances. And so that's how I got to that's how Bob was engaged to do it. And but I have never seen the film, I don't think anyone has ever seen it. And one of these days, I'm going to get in touch with that university and say, I want to see that.
Well, I mean, it's a very interesting film because most of the score was completely cut out,
Yeah.
with very few exceptions. I want to talk about the trajectory of Robert's life and career. He's originally from Pennsylvania, but when he was a child, their family moved to Gary, Indiana, and he began dancing by dancing with older women in the dance halls as a ballroom dancer.
Well, what happened is that his father died suddenly, and so we left his wife and Bob's brother and sister, and they needed money. And so Bob's teacher in high school, a gym teacher, also had the Arthur Murray dance school, and he asked Bob if he would like to work there because Bob was very good looking, 6 foot tall or more, and the women who he worked with and taught dancing, ballroom dancing, were very happy. So then, but I've forgotten his name now. But anyway, he saw Bob's potential, and he sent him into Chicago every week for dance lessons, and then the Chicago Opera Ballet hired Bob, and that's how he started his dance career. But then the Ballet Russe was passing through on a tour, and they advertised they needed a dancer, and so he calls up. David Lushine was connected with the Ballet Russe, and Russian guy, and he calls him up in the morning, and he said, "I'd like to audition for you." And David, with his thick accent, says, "Boy, why you dummy? You wait to the last minute. Why you dummy? Okay, come to the theater at 5 o'clock." And he went, and then David said, "Do you have any music?" He said, "I don't have any music." And all right, I give you some combinations. So then he did them, and he liked it. And he said, "Well, we need a tall boy." So that's how Bob was hired. But another bit of this is Bob was dancing on air on the way home. And then he realized, I have no money to go to New York or stay in a hotel the night before they sail. But his brother had saved $600 for a car because his car was totaled, and that's how Bob was able to join the Ballet Russe and tour with them.
Now he toured, and then they were in Havana when they all decided to go on strike. There's actually this is a caricature that was drawn at the time. And if you can talk a little bit about what was going on then, and then I have a clip that I'm going to share with you. You sat down with Robert and you interviewed him shortly before he passed away. So we're going to hear in his own words a little bit about what was going on at that time, as far as the amount of work they were doing and the fact that they were overworked. There were no unions at the time to protect them. So if you can tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go into the clip of him talking about that.
Okay, well, Bob, the conditions were awful. They had to rehearse. They had to have class in the morning. They had a performance in the afternoon. They had a performance at night. They had a little break for night. And then if there was a new ballet, they would have to rehearse after the shows. But then their salary was almost nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And but they when they were passing through in New York on a by the way, this was around 1941.
41,
because of the war in Europe, the Ballet Russe was away from Europe, and they went on a long Australian tour, and they came into the San Francisco, and they made their way across the United States. They played in um, um, school auditoriums. They played anywhere they could find on the way to New York, and they and some of these had never even seen ballet. Some of these places. Then they got to New York, and the unions were just beginning, and so Colonel de Basel, he was the director of the company, and by the way, before I tell you that, he decided that any person, even though they were from other countries, would have to have a Russian name. So he was such a phony. But anyway, so Bob became known as Anton Wassoff. And then a woman came from Canada, Betty Lowe, and Betty became Ludmilla Babova. So everybody had Russian names. But anyway, so then they got to New York, and Colonel de Basel, by the way, he was never a colonel, but he was a private. Anyway, Colonel de Basel met with the unions, and they agreed that their salaries would be doubled. They would cut their rehearsal times and everything. And that, of course, the dancers were thrilled. And then they went to Philadelphia for engagement, and then Mexico for a week. And then they got on the boat to Havana, Cuba, where they were going to open. And Colonel de Basel tore up the agreements. And then they tried to negotiate on the ship, and once they got there, and he wouldn't give in. So 18 members of the company struck on opening night. And the audience, which was glittering wealthy people from Cuba at the time, they didn't know that 18 members of the company were in a cafe across the street.
Mm-hmm.
So of course the performance was pretty much of a disaster.
Yeah.
And the Ballet Russe faded away.
Well, I'm going to share this clip, and this is from an interview that you conducted with Robert, where he's talking about the unionization at the time of the dancers. And then I've got a couple of questions I want to ask about this when we finish.
When we got back to America from Australia, it was just the start of unionization for dancers and character artists. I think equity for actors had been in effect for some years before that, but the AGMA, which was the American Guild of Musical Artists, was just being born, and so we were required to join it and to perform under its contracts for that season. Well, that made a great difference to us because, first of all, our salaries practically doubled overnight, and secondly, we were paid overtime for rehearsals, and thirdly, our rehearsal time was governed. We could only rehearse so many hours a day and so many hours a week, and every hour we had to have a break.
Before that,
this was unknown. Our normal day was class either at 9 or 10 in the morning, and after the class we would rehearse until lunchtime, and we have a short break for lunch, usually a half an hour, and then we would come back and rehearse until 5 and sometimes even till 6, and then grab a bite to eat and go and do the show. And then after the performance, if we were working on a new ballet, it didn't happen all the time, but if we were working on a new ballet and they were pressed for rehearsal time, we would rehearse after the show, sometimes till 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And we didn't get a dime for any of that. Not a dime, get our $37 a week.
And the fact is that they were set up as a union, and when they went out of the country, everything was tossed out, all the union rules and everything. I want to ask you, I know that he was out there fighting for this. Was he an activist in other areas of his life as well?
I think Bob was. I think Bob and the 18, 17 other people, I think they looked up to, he became the secretary treasurer of the group. By the way, they then, I think I'm jumping ahead of the actual strike, and then all these members were stuck in Cuba, and they were stuck for about 6 months, and they got donations. Finally, the word spread, and they got donations from people like Lincoln Kirsten and Jerry Robbins and various other groups and unions in America. I think that, but they still were stuck. But in the meantime, David Lachine, who was in, the Ballet Russe, he and the colonel didn't get along. So David left with Rene Blum, who was connected with it, and they formed their own Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where Rodeo comes in, because Bob was able to get away after a while, quite a while, and he joined that company, and Agnes came to do Rodeo. So I think if you have any more of Bob Quicks.
Well, I want to show I want to show a clip here of Robert talking about the collaboration process, working in rehearsals with both Agnes de Mille and Jerome Robbins. Here is this clip.
We would go and rehearse for a couple of weeks before the actual rehearsal started. When the actual rehearsal started, you were then under equity and you got paid. But they would just ask the dancers, and we all just said yes, and we went and did it. They wouldn't allow it now. Agnes did, and Jerry Robbins did, certainly. But not only that, I went, and a lot of us went to work on Agnes's ballets that she did for Ballet Theatre. Ballet Theatre would be on tour, and she would create the ballet on us. And then when Ballet Theatre would come to New York for their spring season, we would teach them. We never got paid a penny for any of that. I was the minister and the father in Fall River's Legend were both done on me, and so was the prince in Tally Ho. And that took weeks and weeks of work, and we never were paid for that. Agnes was more of a dramatic choreographer. Her work was not built so much on pure dance as it was on dance and dramatics and emotions, whereas Jerry was more pure dance. I would say that Jerry was able to demonstrate better than Agnes, except in the point of view of acting. And there Agnes was very good, very, very good. The idea certainly always comes from the choreographer, and the final outcome of the dance is the result of the choreographer's originality and his idea. But a lot of the movement comes from the dancers themselves. Or the dancers elaborate on a movement that the choreographer shows, and then they do, So it's sort of it's a collaborative effort. We were rehearsing this ballet, and it was very complicated. Then we saw And you know that Hollywood Bowl is vast and built. And we saw this little lady running around through the aisles out there. She had a blue dress on, summery dress, and a big blue straw hat, navy blue straw hat, and lots of red hair, very curly, and a briefcase. And she finally made her way up to the stage, and it's Agnes de Mille. And she introduced herself, and she told us she should come to do a ballet for us. Well, we hadn't heard of that. No, we didn't know it. But anyways, it was true. It was arranged that she would do it. And so she then traveled with us for months, and practically the whole rest of the tour. And we would rehearse in hotel ballrooms and any place we could find during the tour. Then we did Rodeo, her ballet Rodeo. Well, it's built on a Western theme around a ranch with cowboys and rodeo people. That premiered at the Metropolitan Opera that spring season after the tour. Oh, sensational. It's about 32 curtain calls, I think. Yes, this audience stood and cheered and everything. Well, it was the first real American ballet that had been done. Well, it feels great. It feels good. I mean, it feels gratifying, that what you're doing has been appreciated. Well, after Rodeo, I continued, of course, with the ballet. Well, yeah, it was the Ballet Russe in Monte Carlo. I continued, and of course we were performing Rodeo then. And Agnes then was asked by the Theater Guild and Rodgers and Hammerstein to do a musical that they were doing that was going to be based on a Western American theme. And it was called Green Grow the Lilacs. No, I'm mistaken. The Green Grow the Lilacs was the book on which the story was based, but the show was called originally Away We Go, and then they changed it to Oklahoma.
Now, is there anything that you would like to say to elaborate on that before we go into the clip where he talks about how he went into Oklahoma?
He was billed as the caller, but
that was the photograph that we just had up.
His association with Agnes began, and he restaged so many productions of Oklahoma, but many more of Carousel. He did the first London production. See, Agnes was involved with her husband, who was in the army then, but she liked him to reconstruct her choreographer. So he did it so many places, city center, all over, and then this is after I met Bob. The next year, he was asked to do it at the Brussels World's Fair. And he got me a little job in the payroll department. I didn't know anything, but anyway, I was able to go, and it was a wonderful fair. It was each country had a different pavilion. And our pavilion was lovely. It was on 2 decks and surrounding a pool in the middle. But then there was a separate theater, beautiful little theater. I think it may still be there. But anyway, that was where Bob choreographed Carousel. And a couple nights before the opening, it was the opening thing for the American Pavilion. A couple nights before Agnes came, and she wanted to do little touches of that were trademarks of her for her choreographer. She was very nice, and so that's there were so many people came to the American Pavilion, famous people, from all over. But I remember one who came, and that was the Duchess. I'm getting my duchesses wrong.
Well, you've actually gone ahead in our story a little bit.
That was Princess Grace. Came.
Wow, wow.
And
well, I want to go back again. I want to show the clip where Bob talks about going into Oklahoma, and we'll pick up after that.
Good.
Mark Platt, with whom I had been in the ballet, was the lead dancer in Oklahoma when it first opened. And Mark hurt his knee out of town just before the opening, and he danced the opening with his Novocaine shot into his knee, and then he had to be out for a while to get it to recovered. And I attended the opening of Oklahoma in New York with Agnes as her escort, because we were on vacation. The ballet was on vacation, and she asked me to go, and she wouldn't sit down. She was too nervous, so we had to stand in the back of the orchestra in the St. James Theater on the opening night. But anyways, I went in then later and danced in Oklahoma for about 6 weeks. And then Agnes got One Touch of Venus to do. And it was a very interesting show. It had a marvelous production staff.
So you were the principal male dancer?
Yes. And I had a beautiful, and I was so thrilled that it was the first Broadway show that I was doing from scratch. Although everybody loved the dance, the whole company was enchanted with it, but the powers that be decided that it wasn't right for the show, and it was cut. And you know, in later years, that wouldn't have fazed me because that happens all the time. Yeah. But for it being so young and being my first show, it was really heartbreaking. Yeah, but the show turned out to be quite lovely.
Now, I want to get your take on the relationship of Agnes de Mille with Rodgers and Hammerstein. In the next clip that we have, I can either show the clip or you can put your own take on it, about Agnes de Mille, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and the lack of royalties that she received throughout her career, having worked on these iconic shows.
Oh, well, anyway, she was, her contract gave $50 and $50 a performance, I believe. And that contract continued all through her relationships with Rodgers and Hammerstein. But that is, something that she couldn't change, and lasted through their, a career.
I want to show some photographs of the London production of Carousel. If we can just bring up a few of these. He did go to London with the production. Here they are in London, both Bob and Bambi. Do you have any comments?
Oh, it's such a beautiful thing. That was the original, of course. I didn't see the original, but I just have to say, with Bambi, who I'm in touch with all the time, she is the most lovely person and has always been. And I hope she's watching this.
I hope so too. And happy birthday, Bambi.
Yeah, happy birthday coming up. Wonderful. And she was so exciting in this. But I have to tell you, because as I say, I didn't see the original, but some years later I was with Bob and Bambi, and as you know, it was rather a sensual ballet. And I said, Bambi, do you think it was a seduction or a rape? And Bambi said, it depended on the night. So I guess that is what happens with people who are performing together.
I want to talk about some of the other areas also that Robert was very involved in. He was very integral in the early days of television, with live television, and and he was also responsible for bringing one of our most iconic Russian dancers to American audiences.
Well, probably one of the most interesting ones, and I used to go to all the shows he did, but the one was Rudolph Nureyev,
Mm-hmm.
his first American appearance. And what happened that Rudolph and Eric Brun met, and Eric actually helped him escape from the eyes of the Russians who were watching him. He ran across the tarmac and into the arms of Eric and others, so he was able to get away from being dragged onto the airplane. But anyway, Eric was scheduled for, Bob did a lot of shows for Voice of Firestone and the Bell Telephone Hour. It makes me think of those were such quality programs.
Mm.
I must say, they're a little lacking now, but anyway, they were beautiful programs with wonderful artists. But anyway, Eric was scheduled for one of the Voice of Firestones, and but he notified the producers that he had injured himself, and he suggested that he had a friend. His name was Rudolph Nureyev, and they said, "Get him." And that's how one of Bob's.
That's how he made his, television debut with so many people. Yes, yes. He continued choreographing late in life. He worked on pageants. He did all these things for television. Did he want to go back to the stage?
I don't think he wanted to be a dance appearing, but he loved directing. And one time he directed a carousel for a little theater that you know in your town.
That's right.
Again.
The Tappan Zee Playhouse.
No, the other one.
The Helen Hayes Theater.
Yeah.
The Helen Hayes.
It'll come. But anyway, it's a little theater that has existed in Rockland County forever, and so that was more or less. He was able to work with amateurs and make them look really good, and they were budding people, and they got so involved with the show too. They were so excited to recreate something, and Bob was very forceful and gentle with them.
And in his later years, I mean, did he become a mentor to a lot of other dancers? I saw a quote that he said where he felt that the later dancers that came later in his life were much better trained than the dancers of his generation were.
Yes, I always thought that was interesting because that was some of the modesty of Bob, that he recognized that the dancers may have had better training in the past, and he was so interested in their work.
And did he become a mentor for other dancers? Are there dancers specifically that you can mention that he actually worked with? As a mentor, I'm talking about.
Let me think. You're scratching my head. Uh, he worked, of course, with Jerry. Of course, that was way, way back. And I remember when he and Jerry Robbins met, I was right after Bob came into New York with the Ballet Russe and was still with that company. And they took classes together and they became friends. And Jerry's family lived in North Bergen, and Bob used to go over there a lot, and he used to go at Sada's. And but one night, Jerry took him up on the roof of the brownstone, and he said, anyway, they were looking at the skyline of New York, and Jerry said, you know, I have an idea for a ballet. It's about three sailors on leave in New York for a weekend, and that catapulted his. It was called I think you know the name too. But anyway, it was a ballet that became a movie and really started Jerry on his career.
Well, here's a great photograph of Robert that was taken by Jerry Robbins.
Right.
They did become friends, but he also did. There are two other iconic shows that he worked with. Of course, Call Me Madam with Ethel Merman, and he was also in Two's Company with that great musical comedy star Betty Davis.
Oh yes.
So you've got a great story that you tell about the meeting of Betty Davis and Jerome Robbins, if you want to share that with us.
Oh yeah. Well, that was a Two's Company. Betty Davis, who had finally come to life again because of All About Eve, but nobody wanted to touch her anyway. She was very difficult. And so anyway, Betty, Roscoe and Russell had done a Broadway show, a musical. So Betty decided that she would like to do a musical. So they gathered all the best people they could find. Well, first of all, Betty couldn't sing. Second of all, she couldn't dance. And in fact, but she was cast in the show. And they opened way, way out of town, I think Detroit, to avoid the critics. And opening night, she opened the curtains and she got a standing ovation. But she started into a number. It was a rondelet. She had to repeat, verses back and forth. And she fainted. And her then husband, who she met in All About Eve, came along, picked up her head and smacked her across the face and said, "You go out and do your job." So she went out and again standing over. But then the show was in trouble. It was in trouble and it was on the road forever. But when they got to Boston, which was going to be the last stop, and people thought it was going to close, and it was Thanksgiving, and she came before the cast, and with her cigarette and her actually it was gin, and she said, "It's Thanksgiving, and we're all a family. We're all away from home, and Barry and I would like you to come after the show to I forget the name of the hotel." And they had a fabulous turkey dinner, which they supervised. And that was the Betty Davis that some people don't know.
Well, I want to share a few photographs of you and Bob together. Here the two of you are. And we've got a couple of more here that we're going to share. And I love this photograph.
Yes, I like it too. Well,
If you could tell us a little bit about the later years of his life, when he wasn't performing as much, how he spent his leisure time. Tell us a few things about him that we don't know as far as the private man was concerned.
Well, we moved out of our $36 a month apartment because they said it was going co-op and the rent would go way up. So we had a little summer house in your county, Rockland County, and we moved over there year round. And that was because of expense and everything. And then that's how I thought of the name. That's how he got involved with the Antrim Playhouse.
The Antrim Playhouse. Wow. Yes.
And how he worked there for nothing. But anyway, we had a wonderful time in Rockland County. And we always had dogs. And so we used to show one of our dogs, a Kerry Blue, and we used to go to the dog shows and all. But Bob was so involved with so many other things. It seemed that, we never had time for everything. And it was a wonderful time we had. Then we moved to Greenwich. My aunt died and left me her home. And so then we moved over there and we enjoyed there. I still go up there to visit friends. I got a job at the Greenwich Hospital and I worked there for 19 years. No, one thing that happened though is Bob, I don't know whether I mentioned that Bob and Betty, Anton Bossoff and Ludmilla Gobover fell in love and married and had a child, Tony, and that was all going well. But Tony's was getting married to a Greek gal, and they got married in the USA. But the Greek family wanted them to come over and get married there. But Tony couldn't get off work. He was working for the government. So he drove Betty he drove his wife to the plane. And on the way back, unfortunately, somebody struck him and killed. It was a terrible time. But
for that.
Then I can't tell you, really, it was such a comfortable relationship, and we always came into Broadway shows, and often he knew the people involved with them, and was fun. But I have to tell you one funny story of the way. You mentioned the Hollywood Bowl. Well, do you remember the St. Louis Muni Opera House?
Oh, of course, absolutely.
It held 6,000 people, And one night, Bob was in a dance in a show, I don't know which one, and it called for he and his partner to go from the opposite ends of the stage, meet in the middle, and do, have a little dance, and then part, and then come back together again. Well, what happened on the first pass, Bob stretched out his leg, and his pants ripped from one end to the other. And when he came back for the second encounter with the female dancer, he said, "Is it bad?" And she said, "It's awful." So he made the headlines in the St. Louis Dispatch the next day.
That's great. Bill, I can't believe this, but we are at the end of our program. I want to thank you so much for reaching out to me and trusting me to help share Bob's story today. I had a mentor when I was a kid, and she always said that anytime you step on stage, or you step in front of the camera, you're carrying the mantle of all of the great artists that have gone before you. So my hope is that I did well by Bob today. I want to celebrate him. I want to celebrate you. I want to celebrate this great life that the two of you have had together, his legacy of worth, what he left on stage. I hope that everyone that was here today enjoyed today's show. If you did, I hope that you'll subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube, and that you'll hit the like button if you liked today's show. And please tell your friends about what we're doing here. As I say, I'm all about celebrating, and these are lives that are worth celebrating. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Reach out to the 6th person on your friends list and call them. Not an email, not a text message, not an inbox message, but a phone call to let them know what they mean to you. As my dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And you never know what someone's going through at this time. And Bill, I want to give you the final word. I'm actually going to leave the screen so that you've got the stage to yourself. Anything that you want to say about anything that we've talked about today that you want to expound upon, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to the world right now. And again, thank you for being here today.
Well, I'm here in my bedroom, and across town there are, I think, 41 theaters, and they're all dark. But I feel that one day, I think the theater is bigger than the pandemic. I think that one day, there are a couple of theaters, well, I've been in all of them in my years, but the one I loved best was the Belasco, because I have a friend, Carlo, who was the manager there for years. And also the Belasco has a ghost of there, and people really know there. But I dream that one of these days, Broadway will start to open, and theaters all around the world, of course, but Broadway will be open, and I will be sitting in the Belasco Theater, maybe with a stranger on each side, and we're all cheering and applauding, and I'm thinking that maybe, and no social distancing. But the other thing is that I'm a volunteer at the Actors Guild, called the Episcopal Actors Guild. And what we do, and have done since 1952, we have helped actors who are really in distress financially. We help them not get evicted. We help them with their utility bills. We help them with their medical bills, and we also have a food bank for really destitute people. And over those years, I'm sure there were many actors who went on and were encouraged because of our help. And if people are interested in donating something, we rely on donations. By the way, our caseload, I'm told, is over 3 times what would be the normal time. And if I can give you a little telephone number to call, 212-685-2427, or Actors Guild, 1 East 29th Street, New York, New York, 10016. It's been a pleasure to meet you and to work with you and Chuck. It's Chuck's birthday today, and the beautiful work he has done on the visuals. Happy birthday, Chuck.